Look at this guy. He's got a full head of hair. Look at his hairline. Look at his hairline.
That's how it all starts.
Our guest on Escape Your Limits podcast this week has pioneered worldwide fitness through positivity, professionalism, and a passion for the biggest name in MMA. This chain of gyms is growing at an impressive rate, both corporately owned and franchise models, a concept that sees members work to the standards of world champions, enabling everyone to train different. Today, I'd like to welcome to the Escape Your Limits podcast, the president of UFC gyms, Mr. Adam Sedlack.
Thanks, Matt, and remind me that you need to write my obituary when I die, because you made me sound really good there. I appreciate that.
All right, so I don't know if you remember, but we first met, it was in Vegas, and it's a little bit of a story, but there was a comedian on stage, and he was one of these comedians that kind of ripped into everybody, and I remember it being quite late in the evening, and there was a bunch of sort of UFC fighters that have obviously sort of fairly well oiled. And I kind of imagine at any point these guys are going to dive on the stage and sort of tear this guy's head off.
Yeah, yeah, that was Adam Hunter, right?
Yeah,
was he the comedian? Yeah, no, he's fantastic. But you know how the UFC guys, they took it for what it was worth. They understood it was a joke.
Yeah.
On stage. Yeah, that was a good event.
Yeah, and what was it like working with fighters? You know, I guess the nature of the business is that these guys, you know, they're unpredictable and they need to be when they're in the cage. You know, is it as tough as what it looks to kind of work with?
It's interesting because, you know, when we started UFC Gym, it was really about figuring out how to build a gym where people could train like a UFC athlete. And part of creating that DNA was going to watch UFC athletes train. And spending time with them and getting to know them, you soon realize that their integrity, their character, their discipline is unmatched by anybody around the world. And I think, in my opinion, when you look at all athletes, they're really at the top of that chain in regards to all the variables that it takes to become a great athlete. And so it's been my honor to work with some of these guys that we work with on a day in and day out basis to help build this organization, because the way they train and the DNA of the way they're made up, we try to ripple that inside our facilities on a daily basis.
Yeah, and what happens when, like, obviously fairly relevant at the moment, when you have people like Connor that, you know, hits the news for throwing a dolly through a bus? Is that, you know, are those things are kind of potentially risky to the business when something like that hits the news?
You know, here's the way I look at it: is the scale of sports, right? And you look at NFL, NBA, all these sports. There's things that happen all the time,
right.
And I'll tell you that if you compare UFC athletes to the mainstream athletes of other sports, they fail in comparison to the drama that's created by these other sports. And so things happen. And one great thing about athletes is they're very, very passionate. And sometimes that passion can spill over a little bit. But I think when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's very, very non-material, both from the UFC perspective, in my opinion, and also from the UFC gym perspective.
Yeah, okay. So tell us a bit about how you started in the industry, because you've been in it for a while. I guess you've seen quite a few changes. So how did you come into it?
Yeah. You know, straight out of college, I did a summer vacation in San Diego, and I said, let me do a summer job. And so I started in a company called Family Fitness, which later got acquired by 24 Hour Fitness a few years later. And it was really just a front desk gig, to try out the front desk and meet girls and have a good summer. And that front desk gig turned into kind of a fitness instructor, and that fitness instructor gig turned into a sales counselor. And then I got a paycheck, and I go, "You're kidding me? You're going to pay me this much money just to sell memberships?" And then I just stayed, and I stayed at one club, and then I got promoted to an assistant general manager at a different club, and ended up moving through 3 or 4 different clubs, and then became a general manager of a small, at that point, 24 Hour Fitness, and really loved it. You know, I went to school in the art of psychology, but I ended up loving fitness and loving the experience of what a gym brings to you. And once it's in your blood, it's hard to walk away from it, because it's very intoxicating, not only to see people as they come into a gym have a desire to change their life, and then be able to give them kind of that pill to be able to help them change their life. And so as I became addicted to fitness, I then decided to figure out how I want to grow my career professionally, and it really became defined about what I call a circle of association. And so I soon realized that when you have guys like, Mark Mastrov and Jim Rowley and Mike Feeney and guys that at that point I looked at as icons in the industry, and still do today, that if I could put them in my circle of association and fall into their mentorship group, that it gives me a good opportunity to become a better version of myself inside the industry. So I did that early on, and I'm very fortunate to have had their mentorship, over the last, God, how many years is that, from 1994? I don't even know, 24 years now. And so the interesting thing is, so I went from a general manager of a 24-hour fitness, and then managed 4 or 5 clubs. I managed 3 or 4 in San Diego, and then went up to Orange County, managed 3 or 4 clubs. Then became a district manager for 24-hour fitness in Bakersfield. Went from a district manager in Bakersfield to a district manager in LA, and then went from a district manager in LA to a district manager in Portland. And then had the opportunity to be promoted to a regional director in the Midwest, where I oversaw 6 or 7 states in the Midwest. And then took that opportunity and became a divisional vice president for 24-hour fitness in the later stages of my career with them, and relocated to Texas, and had the opportunity to oversee Florida and Texas and the entire Midwest. And so moved 20 times with 24-hour fitness, and it was quite a opportunity, because every time you moved, you learned how to look at fitness in a different way, and you looked at different opportunities with different people, and through that, I've been able to be blessed with all that market intelligence and the way fitness works in different parts of the country, which really, as I look, if I fast forward and look at it from today, it's really served me well as I work and talk with franchisees all the time in each one of those markets.
Right. What would you say, looking at the industry when you came into it, what would you say are some of the big differences to where things are now? Is there a general, difference across all markets, or is it just very different?
It is absolute night and day.
Right.
And so as I went in, and listen, no matter what decade you get into fitness, you always think you're the innovator, right? And so in the 90s, we thought we were the innovator, and I think we were in a lot of cases. I think especially as 24-hour came in and acquired Family Fitness, I think they really brought some innovation around classes and programming at that point. But let's face it, it was more of the Jane Fonda circuit, right? It was leg warmers were in, and it was step aerobics was the key class of the time, and really it was about doing weights and free weights and machines and basic cardiovascular equipment, and every once in a while somebody did a group fitness class, and that was it. And as you take a look at evolvement, right, and you take a look at how the industry has changed to become incredibly functional, and incorporate specialized programming, whether it's MMA based or whether it's different types of fitness functionality, I think that it's a whole new industry that really personalizes itself to the consumer versus personalizing itself to a cluster of population. And so it's fun. I mean, it's fun to be involved with it, because I think with all the added options, it forces brand facilities to become really pressures us to become great and make sure that we're doing the best possible work to be able to service not only our customers, but also service our staff and our teams so they can better service the customer.
Right. And when you at that time, I guess when you moved on from there, it was a pretty big group of clubs. How do you anticipate where the market's going and what you should do next when you are, I guess, fairly attached to a particular model?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really trust. It's the trust that Mark Mastrov, who is a visionary, I think in the industry, has a good sense of what's going to happen in the future. Still today, he talks about how UFC GYM is going to evolve. It's a trust that in that circle of influence with Jim and Mike and others, that they also have, they're rooted and grounded to where the industry is going. And then it's your gut instinct and your intuition that all the boxes are being checked on directionally where the next steps are. And so, as you take a look at even high school, right? And you watch the way high school athletes have developed. I know when I was in high school, and probably when you were in high school, we played 4 or 5 sports throughout a calendar year. And well, now a lot of these athletes are playing one sport. And not only are they playing that sport all year round, but they're going from the high school activity to a private club and then doing specialized training. Well, that didn't exist in the early 90s or late 80s. And so I think with specialty at the youth level comes specialty at the adult level, right? And where people are more intoxicated with the different types of modalities that you can train in today. And so I think it's beneficial for the industry, because I think when you look at competition, so often than not, I think other fitness competitors think the competition is against themselves, but really the competition is themselves, right? So I look at UFC GYM, our only competition is UFC GYM, because we have the opportunity to take a market where anywhere between 18 and 25% of the population work out consistently in a club, and the responsibility and the moral obligation that we have is, can we double that over the next 4 or 5 years? And we need all the competitors to do great work so they can all be involved in getting more people active and fit. So the number one health enemy, as I'm sure you're aware, is procrastination. We've got to change that. We've got to stop that, right? We've got to get people in our gyms and provide this incredible, unique experience to be able to have consumers stay with fitness, both physically and mentally.
Right. Would you say that there's some fundamentals that haven't changed during that period? So again, when you came into it and now, are there some things that are still very important to your business?
For sure. I think there's 2 answers there. I think one is from an operating standpoint. You still want to have health of the business through your EFT and your monthly dues, and you still want to have standard operating practices and principles and fundamentals that that you want to own your trade market and your trade area, and you want to have great relationships within that trade area. I think the basics and fundamentals of keeping clubs clean, from an experiential standpoint with your team, you want to have clean clubs. You want to make sure that you have good programming, equipment that works, locker rooms that don't have, it's not messy all over the place, and you want to have good music, good ambiance. And so I think there's consistencies in regards to the roots of where fitness has come from that will always hold true. And a lot of it is just common sense stuff, and making sure that you're micro-focused on the basics of what a consumer looks for. And we know what that is, right? It's cleanliness, it's experience, it's making sure that they're in a position that they can maximize the benefits of what that fitness gym has.
Right. Is it more of a challenge when you go from a corporate-owned business to a franchise, where you're kind of managing people that are not part of the inner circle of owners? I
wouldn't use the word challenge. I would say it's different.
Okay.
And so with a corporate club, you can be direct. And really the rule of thumb is you're direct, and you talk a lot about the whys behind the what, so you create a purpose of why they're there. And again, you can be directive. With franchisees, it's having expectations around compliance, but then it's also having high persuasion of conversation. And the great thing about a franchise company is that we have the opportunity to pick our franchisees, right? So you don't just sign up any franchisee that comes down the pike and say, I want to do a UFC gym. You have a long conversation with them, and you make sure that philosophically they're in the right place or the right position to be able to execute and deliver and operate the brand the way that we see the brand should be operated. And at that point, as long as you're fair and you educate and you provide deliverables and the right assets, the right content, the right programming, and you have the right support system, franchisees are great to work with. And they actually, what's great about a healthy franchise system is the ability not only to provide them recommendations and to persuade them on how to more effectively operate, but we also often get good feedback from them on how to become a better company. So it's a two-way street. So it is different, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's difficult or more difficult. It's just a different way of communicating when you own clubs versus working with franchisees.
Right. And if you are a franchisee of UFC gyms, then what else do they generally get, as opposed to, like, the brand itself is important, but I guess a big part of the fitness industry is the experience with people and trainers and that fitness experience. So what else do they get to help them be successful?
So, when you think of UFC Gym, we have a signature model. And in these clubs, they're 30, 40,000 square feet. They have a ton of equipment. They have arm bars and saunas and a lot of amenities, kids programming. They have so many variables. But when you look at the core of what makes that UFC Gym signature club great, it really can be wrapped up in 5 or 6 classes. Incredible boxing conditioning programs where you can go in there and burn, close to 1,000 calories in an hour if you do it the right way. You got kickboxing conditioning programs. You got daily ultimate training, which is kind of a intersection of what was really cool about CrossFit and what's great about NASM type of certification is it's really a safe way to become functionally fit. You got Matrix, which is mixing in kind of a TRX movement with MMA. And then you have youth programming and personal training. So each one of these things are a product. And inside that product, there's a whole process of how we roll that to certify and train our clubs to be able to better execute that. And so that's really the DNA of what UFC Gym is just taking those incredible classes and making sure that there's the right content, the right certification process for franchisees to be able to adopt within their facilities and execute in their specific markets.
Right.
And then from that, we identified the top 2 classes. And by the way, I forgot to throw Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in there as well. That's one of the fastest growing segments of UFC Gym is watching this budding BJJ audience continue to climb, because that's people don't know this, but it's such an incredible workout and it's so incredibly empowering. And then from that, we have boxing conditioning, kickboxing, and DUT. We took those 3 classes and we created a boutique model, right? And so from this big UFC Gym platform that has everything you could imagine, it's a fitness superstore, to taking what's best about that and putting it into a 7 to 10,000 square foot box, where it's very functional, it's very class-based, and taking the best of that and putting it in a boutique model where you take the top 2 or 3 classes and you're just incredible at those classes. It allows us for consistency of brand communication, but it also allows us to make sure that we can communicate effectively what we stand for, whether it's to the consumer, to our employees, or to our franchisees.
All right. Do you think it's more difficult nowadays than probably what it was, let's say, 15 or 20 years ago to build a fitness franchise, where I guess previously it would be a case of probably filling it with machines and people, being guided into what they do. Now it sounds, with a lot more complicated. Is that accurate?
So I don't have the history from 20 years ago, but I would say there's a lot less competition 20 years ago, and there's a lot less people in the space. And so that by itself probably creates a unique challenge that people don't have, or that people have today. I would say that's where it's beneficial to be UFC Gym, because we're part of an incredible organization that is supported by the UFC, which just got acquired for $4 billion. And so they're an incredible platform that allows us to grow at tremendous speed, and not only domestically, but around the globe. And so the key is to connect the dots of our purpose and our identity of what we stand for, which, we like to call it train different. And so if you go to any social media platform, you type in #train-different, you're going to see representation from 150 clubs around the world where people are hashtagging that and joining this unique fitness community. Well, that allows us to define, or help better define, who we are to the franchisee. And so I think it creates a unique space for us that's niched out for us. But it's certainly more competitive than ever before, and I think that's a good thing. I think it forces us to be great at what we do, and it forces us to always continue to innovate and make sure that we're providing the right products to the right people.
Right. So coming back to you then, Adam, so you were at 24 Hour Fitness. What convinced you to join a brand which I guess probably at the time was in some states, I think up until recently, it was even banned in certain parts of the country, New York and that. So what convinced you to make a jump like that?
Well, it goes back to people and trusting that circle of influence that's around you. I'm very, very big on people and loyalty. I think that when you check both those boxes and if you do the right work, you work hard, and you always work on yourself to become better at what you do. It allows you a certain path that creates opportunities. And so when I still remember the call when Mark Mastrov called and said, "Hey, I have a concept on how I want to start a fitness facility around the UFC." Now, mind you, I knew nothing about UFC except for what we remember, those big VHS boxes on TV commercials about no rules, and whoever's the baddest man in the world. You had a 300-pound guy versus a 100-pound guy. It was ground versus striking. And I remember those events like UFC 1 and UFC 2, and it was more of a spectacle, right? People wanted to watch it. It was really around entertainment, purely entertainment. And that was my reference point when Mark asked that question. And then he just said, "Trust me, go study it, go investigate it, get on the internet, look around, but then go to a camp and watch a UFC athlete train and then get back to me." So I took that 30, 45 days and had the opportunity to do all that, and went and watched a fight camp and studied the sport. And I understood where directionally Mark was going with this, which was that when you look at how a UFC athlete prepares for a fight, they do it as a village. They have 20, 30 people, coaches that all are specialized in certain areas, whether it's conditioning, whether it's boxing, stand-up, or whether it's ground game, wrestling, and BJJ, nutritional services. They have all these individual coaches that help that fighter become great at what they do. So when they walk into the octagon to fight either a 3-round or a 5-round fight, they're the best version of themselves that they possibly can be. And it's the job of all those coaches to do that. And I saw the brilliance at that point that if we could find staff, coaches, and we can find team members that are all working together as one community to better take care of our consumers, to get them in the best possible shape that they could be in, that we have something special here. Because not only is it about physical condition and going through everything you have to do to become physically conditioned, but it's also about mental conditioning, right? And there's something about doing a boxing class or doing jiu-jitsu that makes you stand a little taller and makes your posture improve and allows you to have more direct eye contact with people. It's a confidence that you build. And that's a very unique function of what UFC Gym is all about. So when you look at where we started, it was really I had to get my mind in place and educate myself on what the brand was about, and then I saw the brilliance of where it could go. And I was incredibly blessed to have the opportunity to help with Jim and Mark really on a regular basis, help mature the brand over a period of time. And we've learned a lot. Just like, look at the UFC. Look at the explosion of UFC from 2008 to 2018. It is a mainstream sport now, with the female audience being at an all-time high, the youth audience being at an all-time high. It's all connected together, because what you see now, when you train like a UFC athlete, you better respect these disciplines. So when you watch somebody tap somebody out in the octagon, you're able to really understand what went into that athlete's ability to be able to tap another person out. It's not easy. It's not easy to do that. It takes years and years and years of practice and discipline to be able to do that. To go 5 rounds in a fight, people think it's easy. It's not. To go 30 seconds sparring with somebody is incredibly difficult. And so I think education is a big piece of the success of the UFC and the consumer now understanding it more than ever before. And I think UFC Gym's been able to take that to a whole nother level in regards to the fitness consumer where it doesn't matter if everybody in our opinion has their own personal fight. Sometimes somebody wants to lose 250 pounds, or sometimes somebody wants to be the next champion of the UFC. It doesn't matter what it is. Everybody has that fight. And it's the responsibility of UFC Gym, no matter what that fight is to give people the best chance of succeeding and performing. And that's what we do on a daily basis.
Right. When I first came to the US, UFC was one of the first groups that kind of gave us a break, Mike Feeney in particular. And when I heard of the brand and started watching it on TV, there was obviously a picture of what it was all about. And very exciting, but almost contradictory to the people that are inside a gym. So my wife and children love going to the UFC gym locally. And what you've seemed to have done is, a big part of the membership base is females and kids. Mm-hmm. How have you sort of been able to take something that, with two complete contrasts, people who are smashing people up in an octagon and then appealing to, as I said, women and children?
Well, there's an operating strategy that's around, how you create content and how you distribute that content. But the more important thing is the value proposition you have in your club. And we know that if we have the right coaches and the right classes, that the consumer will come, right? So we've geared our schedule in all of our facilities to really be about how you intersect more of the functional movements through daily ultimate training and through youth programming and through boxing and kickboxing and other classes that we have in our facilities to be able to speak to the female, to be able to speak to youth. And as an example, what's very popular with females is kickboxing, right? They love working on their lower body, and those kickboxing classes just absolutely do the job. Not only can they burn a significant amount of calories, but all those kicks help them, condition their lower body, their gluteus maximus area, and all those areas, their abdominals, right? And so it's very, very popular, and the time goes by so quick. And so I think it's how we hire, it's our programming, it's the energy within our facilities. So when you walk into a gym, you can feel the energy of similar to that of a UFC event. When the main event and Bruce Buffer's in the octagon saying it's time, when you're in an octagon at 6 p.m. in a UFC gym, you feel that same vibe, and that motivation will drive people to push even harder. And I think that's what speaks to everybody, not just women and kids, but it also speaks to other men and all different types of profiles that come to our facility.
Yeah. And what about kids? Because I get to travel, going to lots of clubs, and one of the things, I've got 2 young children, married, and one of the challenges that we have is that a lot of clubs you go into, you can work out together, but the children go in a creche and they sit there and they play on iPads, which isn't kind of what you want as a parent, because when you come out, they're jumping off the ceiling with all this energy to expend. With your gyms, there's a big focus on getting them active and almost kind of, I've done the Saturday sort of family dirt, and you do it with your children. What was that a decision to sort of be distinctive from everything else that was going on there, or?
Yeah, one of the early on objectives is, coming from where I came from in the industry, that was the same scenario that we had. Was we were really a gym for adults, and a lot of times kids went into this little 600 square foot area that played a video, and they just sat down and watched the TV, and you could see all that energy that they wanted to expel. And when you think about parents, they want to go in and have a great workout, and I think sometimes there's a guilt that their kids are just sitting in a kids club doing nothing. So we thought, man, if we could figure out a way to intersect or create an environment where when mom and dad go work out, whether it's taking a class or it's doing some equipment, that we can also have the kids active, and not only from a fitness perspective, but also be part of a program where they can feel like this is their gym as well, that we could have something incredibly special. So now there's so many situations where it started with adults enjoying the gym, and then eventually they add their kids on. Well, now kids are joining the gym and adding their parents on. And what warms my heart is when I see a family of 4 or 5 walk in, and the 3 kids go off and they go into their kids training program. Sometimes it's jiu-jitsu, sometimes it's daily ultimate training, sometimes it's boxing. But they take these classes, and mom and dad go do their classes in the adult area, and then when they're all done, they come together and they leave the club together, and it really brings this family unity together. I mean, how do you feel if you did the family dut, right?
Yeah.
How did you feel when you did a family dut with your kids? I mean, it's just an incredible feeling at the end of it, right?
It's fantastic, yeah. And they love it, the fact that you're working out, they're working out like their parents are. And
it's an example that you're setting for them. It's a lifestyle. It's all those things. But there's something as a parent that that when you provide them that experience, it's not like going to going to the ice cream store and buying a bunch of ice cream. That's great. It tastes great for 5 minutes, but when you leave that store 10 minutes later, you need a nap. You don't feel very well accomplished after that Baskin-Robbins stop, right? But if you go work out with your kids for 50 minutes, 30 minutes later, you feel incredibly accomplished. And that's the difference. That's the variation. And so that's what makes UFC Gym special.
Right, okay. So as a group, you're sort of a good track record in predicting where things are likely to go. And I guess, choosing that the UFC is going to be a mainstream sport obviously took a lot of that. What's your thoughts and the things you talk about as a group to say where things will be going next? The boutique, I know you're looking at things in that area as well. What's your prediction over the next few years?
So I think first and foremost, it's our identity around our 5 classes is critically important. And I think one of our responsibilities is to continue to make sure we have good content, and we have the right people developing that content for our franchise partners and for our company-owned stores, which service our consumers. And so I think there's different ways to do that through technology and the different ways that we develop a facility. And so that will always continuously change, but the core of who we are is going to stay consistent. I think the consumer wants to have the ability to join a community that's around the class and join a community around the gym. And that's what makes UFC Gym special. And we've now identified that there's communities that love to be in this big gym box that's 40,000 square feet. There's communities that love the 10,000 square foot box or 5,000 square foot box. And there's certainly a boutique customer now that wants to go into a class format and just be part of that class identity. And so through technology, through media sources, media experts, we're going to continue to make sure we just stay innovative in all the key areas.
Right, okay. And what about marketing? Marketing's changed. I know years ago it was very much, putting leaflet drops and print ads. Did you ever do that when you were starting out? I
door to door?
I did a lot of door-to-door leaflet drops.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing that's new and innovative in terms of marketing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So I think a lot of it, first and foremost, comes from the value proposition in your club and making sure that you have such a strong appeal to the consumer that they want to refer people. So you always have to have a very strong referral program. And we've been able to incorporate our phone app technology with different platforms to make sure that we can continue to drive that referral program. And there's a lot of different things that we have planned over the next 3 to 5 years that's going to continue to innovate that space around referrals. Certainly, we know this is a social climate, and we know that in regards to media, there's things that we all like to measure on ROI, but there's also things that you can't measure. So I think we're always in an environment that we're going to test certain things, the different vehicles, to see if we can get return on the way we communicate to our consumers. And then there's also the areas of that are starting to excel. And so we know that podcast and YouTube videos and obviously via the other social channels and digital investment, that you have to be very strategic and make sure that you really understand not only today how you're trying to accomplish creating more guests, but also what that looks like in 6 months, 12 months, and 2 years down the road. And so we are working with some of the best people in the industry about how to do that. Internally, we have an incredible team and staff in our office that not only focuses on the value proposition of content for our customers, but then also focuses on the marketing strategy to better make sure that we can acquire new consumers on a regular basis. Not only acquire new consumers, but also keep them inside the club so they don't cancel. So all that's being worked on, and I think it's a changing target on a continual basis. I think you have to stay very fresh with ideas and concepts, and that's what's great about New Evolution Ventures, is that with their presence around the globe, they are able to talk to so many different operators and people and leaders inside the space that it gives us the opportunity to pick their brains on a continual basis to make sure we're the best that we can be.
Yeah, yeah. And you've got, when you say the podcast, I've been sort of reading up, and you've got one which is on iTunes, which is music tracks, so you can go in the gym and you can listen.
Yeah.
You know, every week you got new DJs playing music.
Yeah. So the podcast, first and foremost, we have an environment in our clubs where people don't really need headphones, right? You go in there and our music's a little louder, it's a little edgier, beats per minute are a little bit faster, but we like that. We like the results feel, the results culture, but it's not for 100% of the people. So we created UFC GYM Radio, which is a podcast that has 4 or 5 different DJs that allows us to make sure that we identify if somebody likes rock. Like sometimes I like to just go back to the 60s and 70s and listen to that hardcore rock, right? And so we have a podcast within the channel. There's a rock upload, right? And there's sometimes some high beats per minute uploads, and so a consumer has the ability to pick whatever they want. It's commercial free, and while they're in the gym, they can listen to it and hopefully have a great workout. And then we've also extended it to podcast interviews, and so we have the ability to have all these incredible UFC athletes at our disposal, and so we're able to get them in an office and just talk to them about what made them successful inside the MMA space, and talk to them about their life and how they grew up and the disciplines that they went through to get them to the current destination in which they've arrived. And so that's been interesting. You learn a lot, and quite frankly, I think when some of our members or customers hear it, it allows them to look at not only UFC in a different way, but it also allows them to look at the way they work out in a more unique way.
Yeah. So just before we finish, I've got a couple of quick fire questions. What do you think is one of the biggest threats facing your business, and why?
I think it's in the fitness industry in general. I think there's a risk of people that are trying to get into it just to make a few bucks in the short term. And so people will go to rent out a garage, put some free weights in it, and people will just get in there and try to make a buck. And I think that it's going to be very important for customers to vet out what they're joining, because this is a lifestyle change for a customer, and it's an experience that's created once they enter those 4 walls. So I think it's about the quality of operator is the biggest risk in the future within the industry.
Right. Okay. What would you say is one of your biggest personal failures or disappointment, and how did you overcome it?
That's a good question. Well, you threw that one right at me, didn't you? I think being reflective is that when, as a leader, and as you gain maturity in the industry, it's really about learning about yourself. And we all make decisions every day, right? You're a leader, and you make decisions every day that impact your organization. And through the almost decade now that I've been with UFC GYM, there's certainly been decisions that I've made that if I had to do over again, I would have done differently. And I think the key is just making sure that you learn from the bad decisions that you make, and you try not to replicate them or duplicate them again. But second, when there's decisions that have to be made, you have to always slow down, think about it, because not only are you impacting other people's lives that may work around you, but you're impacting all these customers that are in our gyms, right? And one bad decision can create a negative impact for a lot of people. And so I think that when you look at maturity, when I was in my low 20s, I didn't understand why all these executives were in their 30s and 40s and 50s, but now I do, because they go through failure and they go through all this experience to better identify how to make decisions. And so I think early on in my career, I would say that my decision process was very more self-serving and more personally motivated. And I say as I mature and as I have a better understanding of business and fundamentals of fitness and been mentored by such a great group of people, and now I understand it's about people, and it's about making other people around you better and become great. So I think it's personal judgment, it's emotional intelligence, which I think is incredibly important of any leader to be able to help drive a brand the right way.
Yeah. Where do you go for new ideas and inspiration?
Well, we got a great network of people through New Evolution Ventures, so we have a ton of that all the time. We have the UFC that is always presenting us ideas and concepts, and we have an incredible group of franchisees that are very spirited, that always provide feedback. We have just so many corporate team members. I learned a long time ago that it's great to listen to experts, but it's also great to listen to the people that are every day fighting the fight in the field. The ones that are helping our consumers train a little bit differently, the ones that are selling the memberships, the ones that are greeting people at the front desk. The best ideas come from that level. So I think it comes from multiple places, but I think the key for us is authenticity, the people that kind of know what we're about and are involved with us, relying on their creative genes and what they bring to the table to better shape where we're going to go as an organization.
Yeah, definitely. What's your least favorite business activity, and how do you deal with it?
Sitting in an office and being on email, because you know what you do is you sit forward, your posture becomes bad, right? And over a period of time, all of a sudden my eyes have gone bad, and I don't know if you can see my hairline, but it's not there anymore.
It's a bit like mine.
Yeah, it's right there with yours. Listen, it's the best time in this industry is when you're in the field with people, whether it's an owner or a team member or a customer. It's energizing. And unfortunately, we just can't do that 24/7, right? And so there's a business to run, and there's a global organization that we're trying to continue to drive forward. And so there's a lot of data-centric work that has to be done in a corporate office. So that's the least appealing part of my job, but it's the discipline of having to do that to make sure that I can better serve all the team members that are around us to be successful.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then finally, Escape Your Limits is about overcoming what you've been told or people have told you that's impossible, and then making it possible. What would be an example of in your career where there's something that you've either believed yourself is impossible or people have thought and you've sort of overcome it?
Well, personally, I was told I would never dunk a basketball, but I ended up being able to dunk it with the help of a chair. No, I mean, listen, I think everybody professionally has their own path, and as I came into UFC GYM, one of the things that I really bought into was looking at what people were going to say about UFC GYM, and I saw so many doubters out there that didn't think the concept could work, they didn't think we were in it for the right reasons. And as I internalized that, it became more of a motivator, right? And Mark had one great thing that he told me, I don't know, probably 18 years ago now, where he created a doubt wall, and everybody that doubts you and the ability for you to do something, just put it on your wall and take a look at it every day. And so I still have, I think 8 or 9 of these posts that said that, that the UFC GYM is a McDojo, and it's going to be here for a year, and it's going to fold, and it's just one thing after the other. And I internalized that. And although initially it felt negative, if you believe in the people that are around you, and you believe in the product, which I do wholeheartedly, nothing can stop you. So overcoming that paradigm of everybody's perspective and opinions, and just holding true to the values of what makes a good fitness organization, I think it's created a lot of success for us.
Fantastic. Well, Adam, appreciate your time. Great story. Best of luck with everything, and look forward to maybe catching you in the ring later.
Let's get in the octagon right now. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate
Cheers.
it.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.